Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. Tonight we will continue our dive into the second of the short stories contained within the pages of the Bachman books, The Long Walk. When we last left Ray Garrity and our friends on the road, things were difficult. There's not much of anything going on, other than a group of young men falling apart on the highway. And so that is where we begin tonight with Chapter 11. They passed into Old Town around midnight. They switched through 2 feeder roads, joined Route 2, and went through the center of town. For Ray Garrity, the entire passage was a blurred, sleep-hazed nightmare. The cheering rose and swelled until it seemed to cut off any possibility of thought or reason. Night was turning into glaring, shadowless day by flaring arc sodium lamps that threw a strange orange light. In such a light, even the most friendly face looked like something from a crypt. Confetti, newspaper, shredded pieces of telephone book, and long streamers of toilet paper floated and soared through second and third story windows. It was a New York ticker tape parade in Bush League, USA. No one died in Old Town. The orange arc lamps faded, and the crowd depleted a little as they walked along the Stillwater River in the trench of mourning. It was May 3rd now. The ripe smell of paper mills smote them. A juicy smell of chemicals, wood smoke, polluted river, and stomach cancer waiting to happen. There were conical piles of sawdust, higher than the buildings downtown. Heaped sacks of pulpwood stood to the sky like monoliths. Garrity dozed and dreamed his shadowy dreams of relief and redemption. And after what seemed to be an eternity, someone began jamming him in the ribs. It was McVrees. "What's the matter?" "We're going on the turnpike," McVrees said. He was excited. "The word's back. They got a whole son of a bitchin' color guard on the entrance ramp. We're going to get a 400-gun salute." Into the valley of death rode the 400. Garrity muttered, rubbing the sleepy seeds out of his eyes. "I've heard too many 3-gun salutes tonight. Not interested. Let me sleep." "That isn't the point. After they get done, we're going to give them a salute." "We are?" "Yeah, a 46-man raspberry." Garrity grinned a little. It felt stiff and uncertain on his lips. "Is that right?" "It certainly is." "Well, a 40-man raspberry. A few of the guys are pretty far gone now." Garrity had a brief vision of Olson, the human Flying Dutchman. "Well, count me in," he said. "Bunch up with us a little, then." Garrity picked it up. He and McVrees moved in tighter with Pearson, Abraham, Baker, and Scram. The Leather boys had further shortened their vanguard. "Is Barkovich in on it?" Garrity asked. McVrees snorted. "He thinks it's a great idea since pay toilets." Garrity clutched his cold body a little tighter to himself and let out a humorless little giggle. "I bet he's got a hell of a wicked raspberry." They were paralleling the turnpike now. Garrity could see the steep embankment to his right, and the fuzzy glow of more arc sodiums, bone white this time, above. A distance ahead, perhaps half a mile, the entrance ramp split off and climbed. "Here we come," McVrees said. "Kathy!" Scram yelled suddenly, making Garrity start. "I ain't gave up yet, Kathy!" He turned his blank, fever-glittering eyes on Garrity. There was no recognition in them. His cheeks were flushed, his lips cracked with fever blisters. "He ain't so good," Baker said apologetically, as if he had caused it. "We've been giving him water every now and again, but also pouring it over his head. But his canteen's almost empty, and if he wants another one, he'll have to holler for it. It's the rules. Scram, Garrity said. Who's that? Scram's eyes rolled wildly in their sockets. It's me. It's Garrity. Oh, you seen Kathy? No, Garrity said uncomfortably. Here we come, McVrees said. The crowd's cheers rose in volume again, and a ghostly green sign came out of the darkness. Interstate 95, Augusta, Portland, Portsmouth, points south. That's us, Abraham whispered. God help us and point south. The exit ramp tilted up under their feet. They passed into the first splash of light from the overhead arcs. The new paving was smoother beneath their feet, and Garrity felt a familiar lift-drop of excitement. The soldiers of the color guard had displaced the crowd along the upward spiral of the ramp. They silently held their rifles to high port. Their dress uniforms gleamed resplendently. Their own soldiers in their dusty half-track looked shabby by comparison. It was like rising above a huge and restless sea of noise and into the calm air. The only sound was their footfalls and the hurried pace of their breathing. The entrance ramp seemed to go on forever, and along the way was fringed by soldiers, in scarlet uniforms, their arms held in a high port salute. And then, from the darkness somewhere, came the Major's electronically amplified voice. Present arms! Weapons slapped flesh. Salute! Ready! Guns to shoulders, pointed skyward above them in a steely arch. Everyone instinctively huddled together against the crash, which meant death. It had been Pavloved into them. Fire! 400 guns in the night. Stupendous. Ear-shattering. Garrity fought down the urge to put his hands to his head. Fire! Again the smell of powder smoke, acrid, heavy with cordite. In what book did they fire guns over the water to bring the body of a drowned man back to the surface? My head, Scram moaned. Oh, Jesus, my head aches. Fire! The guns exploded for the third and last time. McVrees immediately turned around and walked backwards, his face going a spotty red with the effort it cost him to shout. Present arms! 40 tongues pursed 40 sets of lips. Salute! Ready! Garrity drew breath into his lungs and fought to hold it. Fire! It was pitiful, really. A pitiful little noise of defiance in the big dark. It was not repeated. The wooden faces of their color guard did not change, but seemed all the same to indicate a subtle reproach. Oh, screw it, said McVrees. He turned around and began to walk frontwards again, with his head down. The pavement leveled off. They were on the turnpike. There was a brief vision of the Major's jeep spurting away to the south, a flicker of cold fluorescent light against black sunglasses. And then the crowd closed in again, but farther from them now, for the highway was 4 lanes wide, 5 if you counted the grassy median strip. Garrity angled to the median quickly and walked in the close-cropped grass, feeling the dew seep through his cracked shoes and paint his ankles. Someone was warned. The turnpike stretched ahead, flat and monotonous. Stretches of concrete tubing divided by this green inset, all of it banded together by strips of white light from the arc sodiums above. Their shadows were sharp and clear and long, as if thrown by a summer moon. Garrity tipped his canteen up, swigged deep, recapped it, and began to doze again. 80, maybe 84 miles to Augusta. The feel of the wet grass was soothing. He stumbled, almost fell, and came awake with a jerk. Some fool had planted pines on the median strip. He knew it was the state tree, but wasn't that taking it a little far? How could they expect you to walk on the grass when there were... They didn't, of course. Garrity moved over to the left lane, where most of them were walking. 2 more half-tracks had rattled onto the turnpike at the Orono entrance to fully cover the 46 walkers now left. They didn't expect you to walk on the grass. Another joke on you, Garrity, old sport. Nothing vital, just another little disappointment. Trivial, really. Just don't dare wish for anything, and don't count on anything. The doors are closing. One by one, they're closing. They'll drop out tonight, he said. They'll go like bugs on a wall tonight. I wouldn't count on it, Collie Parker said, and now he sounded worn and tired, subdued at last. Why not? It's like shaking a box of crackers through a sieve, Garrity. The crumbs fall through pretty fast. Then the little pieces break up, and they go too. But the big crackers... Parker's grin was a crescent flash of saliva-coated teeth in the darkness. The whole crackers have to bust off a crumb at a time. But such a long way to walk. Still. I still want to live, Parker said roughly. So do you. Don't shit me, Garrity. You and that guy McVrees can walk down the road and bullshit the universe and each other. So what? It's all a bunch of phony crap, but it passes the time. But don't shit me. The bottom line is, you still want to live. So do most of the others. They'll die slow. They'll die one piece at a time. I may get it, but right now I feel like I could walk all the way to New Orleans before I fell down on my knees for those wet ends in their kitty car. Really? He felt a wave of despair wash over him. Really? Yeah, really. Settle down, Garrity. We still got a long way to go. He strode away, up to where the leather boys, Mike and Joe, were pacing the group. Garrity's head dropped, and he dozed again. His mind began to drift clear of his body. A huge sightless camera full of unexposed film, snapping shutter shots of everything and anything, running freely, painlessly, without friction. He thought of his father, striding off in big green rubber boots. He thought of Jimmy Owens, and he had hit Jimmy with the barrel of his air rifle, and yes, he had meant to, because it had been Jimmy's idea. Taking off their clothes and touching each other had been Jimmy's idea. It had been Jimmy's idea. The gun swinging in a glittering arc, in a glittering, purposeful arc. The splash of blood. I'm sorry, Jim. Oh, geez, you need a Band-Aid? Across Jimmy's chin, helping him into the house. Jimmy hollering. Garrity looked up, half stupefied and a little sweaty in spite of the night chill. Someone had hollered. The guns were centered on a small, nearly portly figure. It looked like Barkovich. They fired in neat unison, and the small, nearly portly figure was thrown across 2 lanes like a limp laundry sack. The bee-pimpled moon was not Barkovich's. To Garrity, the face looked rested, at peace. He found himself wondering if they wouldn't all be better off dead, and shied away from the thought skittishly. But wasn't it true? The thought was inexorable. The pain in his feet would double, perhaps triple before the end came, and the pain seemed insupportable now. And it was not even pain that was the worst. It was the death. The constant death, the stink of carrion that had settled into his nostrils. The crowd's cheers were at a constant background to his thoughts. The sound lulled him. He began to doze again, and this time it was the image of Jan that came. For a while he had forgotten all about her. In a way, he thought disjointedly, it was better to doze than to sleep. The pain in his feet and his legs seemed to belong to someone else to whom he was tethered only loosely, and just with a little effort he could regulate his thoughts, put them to work for him. He built her image slowly in his mind. Her small feet, her sturdy but completely feminine legs, small calves, swelling to full, earthy peasant thighs. Her waist was small, her breasts full and proud, the intelligent, rounded planes of her face, her long blonde hair. Horse hair, he thought it for some reason. Once he had told her that. It had simply slipped right out, and he thought she would be angry, but she had not replied at all. He thought she had been secretly pleased. It was the steady, reluctant contraction in his bowels that raised him this time. He had to grit his teeth to keep walking at speed until the sensation had passed. The fluorescent dial on his watch said it was almost 1 o'clock. Oh God, please don't make me have to take a crap in front of all these people. Please, God. I'll give you half of everything I get if I win. Only please compensate me. Please. Please. His bowels contracted again, strongly and hurtfully, perhaps affirming the fact that he was still essentially healthy, in spite of the pounding his body had taken. He forced himself to go on until he had passed out of the merciless glare of the nearest overhead light. He nervously unbuckled his belt, paused, and then, grimacing, shoved his pants down with one hand protectively across his genitals, and squatted. His knees popped explosively. The muscles in his thighs and calves protested screamingly and threatened to knot as they were bullied unwittingly in a new direction. Warning! Warning 47! John! Hey, Johnny! Look at that poor bastard over there! Pointing fingers, half seen and half imagined in the darkness. Flashbulbs popped and Garrity turned his head away miserably. Nothing could be worse than this. Nothing. He almost fell on his back and managed to prop himself up with one arm. A squealish girl voice. I see it! I see his thing! Baker passed him without a glance. For a terrifying moment, he thought it was all going to be for nothing anyway. A false alarm. But then it was all right. He was able to take care of business. Then, with a grunting half-sob, he rose to his feet and stumbled into a half-walk, half-run, clinching his pants tight again, leaving part of him behind to steam in the dark, eyed avidly by 1,000 people. Bottle it. Put it on your mantle. The shit of a man with his life laid straight out on the line. This is it, Betty. I told you we had something special in that game room. Right up over here, over the stereo. He was shot 20 minutes later. He caught up with McVrees and walked beside him, head down. Tough? McVrees asked. There was unmistakable admiration in his voice. It was real tough, Garrity said, and let out a shivery, loosening sigh. I knew I forgot something. What? I left my toilet paper at home. McVrees cackled. As my old granny used to say, if you ain't got a cob, then just let your hips slide a little freer. Garrity burst out laughing. A clear, hearty laugh with no hysteria in it. He felt lighter, looser, no matter how things turned out. He wouldn't have to go through that again. Well, you made it, Baker said, falling in step. Jesus, Garrity said, surprised. Why don't you guys just send me a get-well card or something? It's no fun with all those people staring at you, Baker said soberly. Listen, I just heard something. I don't know if I believe it. I don't know if I even want to believe it. What is it? Garrity asked. Joe and Mike, the leather jacket guys everybody thought were queer for each other, they're Hopis. I think that was what Scram was trying to tell us before, and we weren't getting him. But, you see, what I hear is that they're brothers. Garrity's jaw dropped. I walked up and took a good look at him, Baker was going on, and I'll be goddamned if they don't look like brothers. That's twisted, McVrees said angrily. That's fucking twisted. Their folks ought to be squatted for allowing something like that. You ever know any Indians? Baker asked quietly. Not unless they came from Passaic, McVrees said. He still sounded angry. There's a Seminole reservation down home across the state line, Baker said. They're funny people. They don't think of things like responsibility the same way we do. They're proud and poor. I guess those things are the same for the Hopis as they are for the Seminoles. And they know how to die. None of that makes it right, McVrees said. They come from New Mexico, Baker said. It's an abortion, McVrees said with finality, and Garrity tended to agree. Talk flagged all up and down the line, partially because of the noise from the crowd, but more, Garrity suspected, because of the very monotony of the turnpike itself. The hills were long and gradual, barely seeming like hills. Walkers dozed, snorted fitfully, and seemed to pull their belts tighter and resign themselves to a long, barely understood bitterness ahead. The little clots of society dissolved into threes, twos, and solitary islands. The crowd knew no fatigue. They cheered steadily with one hoarse voice. They waved unreadable placards. Garrity's name was shouted with monotonous frequency, but blocks of out-of-staters cheered briefly for Barkovich, Pearson, Wyman. Other names blipped past and were gone with the speeding velocity of snow across a television screen. Firecrackers popped and sputtered in strings. Someone threw a burning road flare into the cold sky, and the crowd scattered, screaming, as it pinwheeled down to hiss its glaring purple light onto the dirt of a gravel shoulder beyond the breakdown lane. There were other crowd standouts. A man with an electric bullhorn, who alternately praised Garrity and advertised his own candidacy to represent the 2nd District. A woman with a big crow in a small cage, which she hugged jealously to her bosom. A human pyramid made out of college boys in University of New Hampshire sweatshirts. A hollow-cheeked man with no teeth, in an Uncle Sam suit wearing a sign which said, "We gave away the Panama Canal to the communist niggers." But otherwise the crowd seemed as dull and bland as the turnpike itself. Garrity dozed on fitfully, and the visions in his head were alternately of love and horror. In one of the dreams, a low and droning voice asked over and over again, "Are you experienced? Are you experienced? Are you experienced?" And he could not tell if it was the voice of Stebbins or of the Major. That was Chapter 11 of The Long Walk, the second short story contained within the pages of the Bachman books. It's quite difficult for me to say where we have been, because where we are is on the outside of Old Town, and no one's been shot for an hour and a half. The only thing that has changed is that we now have crowds flanking either side of the road, and everything is lit up by the lights on the interstate. I think that makes it harder on the boys. And one of them said, tonight, most of these boys will die like flies on a windshield. And I think they might be right, because this next night is going to be a tough one. But we can talk about it next time, because this has been Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. And as always, my friends,